Hello, you bread machine lovers, bakers of bread, makers of the home. Welcome to Butterfly Meadows Homestead, where hearts are warmed and bodies are nourished. Today, I am going to be making apple butter. So back before Christmas, I bought about 20 pounds of apples from the Amish country where I go to the Amish salvage store. I got a box, a 20-pound box of apples for $10, and this is them. Not these two. These were extra apples. I'm going to also put in here, but they're just small, golden, delicious apples. They're not really big. A lot of people buy them to feed the deer, to attract deer to their property. There's nothing wrong with them, but I have kept them longer than I intended to. I bought them intending to make apple butter. Shortly after I bought them, several things happened that prevented me from making the apple butter. And then I got sick for 2 weeks. I was sick and I couldn't do that. And then Christmas came. Just so many things happened. So they were in a cold room and they all kept pretty good. I've had to throw out about 3 of them. And they've gotten just a little bit soft. So not really soft, but like the skins have started to wrinkle a little bit. They will still make great apple butter. My only concern is, will I be able to use my Johnny apple peeler? Because you really are supposed to have fresh produce. You know, the apple really needs to be crisp. I wanted to show you this. This is a Johnny apple peeler. I will put a link to it down below in the description on my Amazon website page. There'll be a link to it where you can order one. They're not very expensive, and they work really well. They're simple. This one works with suction, which I like. Some of them have the C-clamp that you have to clamp to the table, and depending on how your table is made, sometimes that doesn't always work. So I like this suction cup type, and you just turn the little lever, and it secures it to your surface. So it stores like that, and when you get ready to peel an apple, you raise that lever back and pull this back, and I'll show you how it works here. I'm hoping I can use it. I did test a couple of apples, and sometimes if they're too soft, they'll break apart, but it's still going to save me a lot of work, even if I have to do some work peeling it by hand. Here I have a large bowl of cold water, and I'm going to pour some lemon juice in there. I probably don't need a bowl that big, but I love my giant bowl. I use it all the time. And as I peel and core the apples, it also slices them. I'm going to put them in my water with the lemon juice, and the lemon juice will keep them from turning brown. And after I get them peeled, we'll move on to the next step. So you take the apple, the end where the stem would be, you put it on, there's a 3 little prong here, and you just slide it up on the prong like so. And then you just crank it, and this peeler adjusts to how deep you want it to go. And I've already got that where I want it, and it will peel the apple, and then it runs it through this core, this piece on the end, which takes out the core and slices it. And like I said, my apples are a little bit softer than they should be, but it comes out of this big long spiral, which is not going to hold together because my apples are too soft, but it'll work fine for cooking them. I am going to be saving my peels and my cores because I am going to make apple cider vinegar out of them. But I'm just going to get all of these peeled and sliced, and then I'll bring you back. I got all the apples peeled. I was able to run all but just about 5 or 6 of them through the Johnny apple peeler, so that saved me a lot of time. And they're here in my water with the lemon juice. And I am just going to take them and use my hands and take them out of the water and put them into this big roaster pan. So they're already cut up because the Johnny apple peeler does that as it peels and cores. So all I got to do is put them in here. You can also use a slow cooker if you don't have a roaster pan and maybe you're doing a smaller batch. You can also use a slow cooker, but I got this roaster at a thrift store. It was brand new and I got it for cheap. and I have loved it. I use it to bake my turkeys and hams, and I just use it so often. So now that I have my apples in my roasting pan, I'm going to add some apple juice. Now, you could use water if you wanted. You could use apple cider, but I'm going to use apple juice. This is some organic apple juice that I've got, because that'll help increase the apple flavor. And you do have to have, a little water to get your apples going, a liquid rather. And since I don't want to use water, I'm just going to use apple juice. I used about half of that. I think that'll be enough, because once they start to cook down, they'll create their own juice. The USDA guideline for canning apple butter, there's a recipe in the book, and it calls for adding vinegar, apple cider vinegar, to your apple butter. But I'm not going to add as much as it calls for, because I think that'll just make it too sour and tangy. But I am going to add so it calls for I'm doing a double batch, what they would consider a double batch, and it calls for 2 cups of apple cider vinegar per batch. But I'm just going to add 1 cup, and I'm mostly doing that because I think it'll help enhance the flavor. But I am also, after these cook for a while, I am going to use my pH meter and test the pH. So in order to water bath these, we have to have a pH, I think of around 4 or 4 something or below. And so I'm going to test the pH and make sure that it's low enough. If not, we will have to add more vinegar or whatever and adjust it. But I'm pretty sure that it'll probably be just fine. I'm going to let it cook for a little while. So before I add my spices and my sugar, I'm going to let these cook and get tender. And once they cook and get tender, then I'm going to add my sugar and my spices. So I'm going to turn my roaster on to about 325. Put on the lid and let this begin to cook. I'll bring you back when I get ready to go to the next step. If you are enjoying this video, please be sure to like the video and share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and leave me a comment below. On this channel, I try to bring you tried and true recipes and things that I have done. I don't try something new and take you along for the ride. I show you things that I already know how to do, and I've already learned from my mistakes, and then I can show you how to do it, and hopefully you won't have to make the same mistakes that I made. I do lots of cooking and bread making videos, and canning and preserving, and if that's the kind of content you're looking for, then please subscribe to my channel. So our apples have been cooking for a couple of hours, and they're looking pretty good. Now these are going to be cooking. I'm going to turn this down, and I'm going to let this cook all night. And tomorrow morning, I will be putting them in jars and water bathing them. But right now, I'm going to add my sugar and my spices. Now I'm following the recipe fairly close to what's in the USDA canning guidebook. And right here I have 7 cups of sugar, because I have about double of the amount that they're talking about. And each 8 pounds of apples calls for 4 cups of sugar. I'm guessing I had about 16 to 18 pounds of apples. I'm not sure. I didn't weigh them. I'm just guessing. So I have here 7 cups of white sugar. Now the recipe calls for white sugar and brown sugar. I don't have any brown sugar handy. I could get some. I do have some in my pantry, but I'm just going to use white sugar because you don't have to use the brown sugar. So I have here 7 cups of white cane sugar, and I'm going to pour into my apples. And I'm going to be using about 4 tablespoons of cinnamon. And I know that sounds like a lot, but like I said, this is a double recipe. This is a double batch. And this is a 2 tablespoon measuring spoon. So that's 2 and that's 4. And I'm going to add just a little bit of clove it calls for 1 tablespoon of ground cloves, and I'm not going to double that. I'm only going to put, whoops, I'm accidentally going to double that. So I'm going to put about a tablespoon of cloves. I don't want too much clove, but I do love clove. Stir this up. And now this is going to start to smell absolutely amazing with all those spices. Oh, it's going to smell so good. So now I have my seasonings and my sugar in. I'm going to put the lid back on, and I'm going to turn this down to about 190 or 180 is the temperature that I'm going to set it on, because it's going to be cooking all night. And if I'm going to check it in a few hours, and if it's seems to be cooking too hard, because I am going to let it cook overnight, I'll turn it down to even lower. I want it to cook low and slow. It is the next morning, and our apple butter has been cooking on low in the roaster all night. This morning when I got up a couple hours ago, I turned the heat up to about 325 and took the lid off so that I could let some of the liquid cook off, because we want it to get thick. I'm going to go ahead and move this lid. And so what I'm going to do now is I am going to use my immersion blender to break up any chunks of apples. Now, back in the day, before they had immersion blenders, they had these cone-like sieves with this wooden plunger thing that they would force the fruit through to puree it to get out all the lumps. But thankfully, we don't have to do it that way, because we have an immersion blender. And you could even use a potato masher, I suppose, if you didn't have an immersion blender. I pretty much got the lumps out. There may be a few lumps here or there, but personally, I feel like when something is homemade, you kind of expect that, right? It just gives it that homemade feel. The next thing that we have to do is let this continue to cook off and thicken up as the liquid cooks off of it. While we're waiting on that, I have my pint jars sanitized. They are in the dishwasher. I ran them through the sanitize cycle on my dishwasher. I have my water bath canner here. I have the rack in the bottom. So I have my rack here. I have my lids here in a pan of water where I can bring them to a boil. And I have my rings here. I have my funnel. I have my jar lifter. This is my lid lifter, so I don't have to touch the hot lids. And I will have a big ladle spoon to dip them into the jars when the time comes to do all of that, and we will be water bathing these jars for 10 minutes. Anytime you are water bathing something for 10 minutes or less, you need to sterilize your jars and lids, because you don't want to go to all this trouble and all this work and then to have mold or something, bacteria of some type, grow in your jar. So it's always a good idea to sanitize them. However you want to do that. I know there are different methods. You can put them in the canner and let them boil. I think some people put them in the oven. I don't think that's a recommended method, because it can cause the jars to break at some point. They may not break right then, but they may break later on. Our apple butter is finally, it's been cooking all day, and it is about 2 o'clock in the day. So it's been cooking all day, and it is finally to the thickness that I want it. And there's a couple of ways to know when your apple butter is thick enough or has been cooked down enough. One way is that it will mound up on the spoon, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but it does kind of mound up on the spoon. And the other way is you take a spoonful, you put it on a plate, and water or liquid does not gather up around the mound. And that's how you know that your apple butter is thick enough to go ahead and put in the jars and process. So I have my jars. I got them out of the dishwasher. Of course, they're cool by now. So I put them in some hot water. And we are going to start filling these jars. I have filled my canner with water, and I have that on heating up so that it'll be hot when I put the hot jars into the canner. And we're going to water bath them for 10 minutes. Now I have a big ladle that I use a lot of times to put things in my jars, but because of the shallowness of this pan, I'm going to just use a large spoon and dip it into my jars this way. Come a little closer to my roaster. I have already tasted of it, and it tastes absolutely delicious. And we're going to have some beautiful apple butter for our shelves. Now, when you're making apple butter, just like with jams and jellies, you only want a 1/4 inch headspace, not the inch. So you want to fill the jars pretty full. We don't want a lot of space there. So hopefully you can see how full that is. So I'm going to go ahead and fill these jars. I'm not sure how many jars I will have. It did cook down quite a bit. Over half has cooked off. Always remember when you're canning that you want whatever, if what you are putting in the jar is hot, then your jars need to be hot or at least warm. They don't have to be the exact same temperature, but you don't want to put a hot liquid into a cold jar and then put that cold jar into boiling water, because it will crack. So if what we were putting in the jars was cold, we would want our jar to be cold, and we would also want to start our canner off cold and not boiling, because the shock would break the bottom of your jar. It would just crack and you would lose the contents of your jar. And I got this jar too full. I think I'm going to be able to get one more jar here. I'm going to take a damp paper towel and wipe off all the rims, because I don't want anything to compromise my seal. I have 7 pints of applesauce, and then there's probably about a half a pint left in here, and I'm going to get that out, and I'm going to put that in a jar for us to eat, to put in the fridge. I'm not going to can it. I won't put it in the canner. So here I have my lids, which I boiled. I boiled them for 2 reasons. 1, to sanitize them, and 2, I have found, I know they say you don't have to boil your lids anymore, but I have found, especially if I'm water bath canning, if I boil that lid, I get a much better seal than if I don't. Got a little bit much in that one, so I'm going to take it out. And I want to take every precaution to get my jars to seal. And we're going to put our lids on finger tight. In other words, just tighten them up. Once it starts to resist, then you can stop. This ring didn't want to go on right, and I have learned from experience, when I have a ring that does that, it's best just to get another ring. it could be bent, or who knows why it doesn't go on right. But I don't want, like I said, I don't want to take a chance on my jar not sealing. So we have our apple butter in our jars. The water bath canner is filled with water and boiling. I'm going to go ahead and put the jars down in the canner carefully. Now I'm going to put my lid on my canner. I roll up a piece of aluminum foil and place it over my pot so that there's a little tiny crack here so the steam can come out. Turn on my fan, and that way the pot won't sputter all around the edges. The steam will come out over there where the aluminum foil is. That's just a little hack that I do. Now, when this comes to a rolling boil, and I'll show you what that looks like, that rolling boil looks like, we'll set the timer for 10 minutes. Our 10 minutes is up, and I turned off the heat from the eye, and I have let the boiling stopped in the pot. And now I'm going to carefully remove the jars and sit them here on this towel, and we're going to leave them here until tomorrow, and then I can label them and put them on the shelf. So counting the jar that was not quite full, which I'm going to call full, we have 8 pints of apple butter, and I'm very pleased with the outcome. I just want to add here that I did test the acidity of my apple butter because I did not use the full amount of vinegar that the canning book called for, and I just want to show you the acidity of this apple butter. Now I have this little pH meter that I use when I'm canning, and you can also buy the little paper litmus test strips, but we want this to be 4 or below, and I am going to check the acidity. It's kind of thick, so you have to get it down in there, and it is registering at 4.0, so it is safe to water bath. And you want to make sure that when you are water bathing that you follow the USDA guidelines so that your food is safe. Hope you found this video helpful and useful, and I hope you'll watch some of my other videos here. God bless. Bye-bye.